Can you go down low? How low can you go, Indiana Fever? Jeez, you guys have just turned this organization into a flat out joke. All of a sudden, Sophie Cunningham is hurt. All of a sudden, her elbow's messed up. Y'all smell that? Smells like BS. It smells like some punishment is being served out to Sophie Cunningham for going.
Despite Cunningham sacrificing her body and taking relentless physical hits night after night to keep Caitlin Clark safe, sit down and brace yourself, because right now, behind closed doors, the Indiana Fever and the entire WNBA are suffocating under a nuclear meltdown that threatens to tear the league apart at its absolute seams. What began as a whispers-only locker room conflict has exploded into a catastrophic, scorched earth war after head coach Stephanie White and front office executives secretly handed down a devastating, private suspension to Sophie Cunningham. They thought they could quietly remove the team's fierce protector, hide the truth behind fake injury reports, and force the locker room into total submission. But they made one fatal, irreversible mistake. They completely underestimated the unshakable bond between Indiana's ultimate enforcer and its world-altering superstar. When Caitlin Clark walked into the facility, saw Cunningham's locker emptied, and discovered the brutal betrayal, the reigning MVP candidate didn't just snap. She went nuclear. Storming into executive offices with blood in her eyes, Clark delivered a chilling ultimatum that sent shockwaves all the way to Commissioner Kathy Engelbert's desk. Reverse Sophie's suspension immediately, or watch the biggest star in basketball walk away from the season forever. This isn't just sports anymore. This is an all-out mutiny for survival. To truly understand the atomic fallout currently destroying the Indiana Fever, you have to rewind to the very moment Caitlin Clark stepped foot into the WNBA. From her historic rookie debut, Clark was forced to carry an unprecedented, suffocating target on her back. Opposing teams didn't just build defensive schemes to slow her down. They launched full-scale physical warfare. Veterans threw violent elbows. Rivals like Angel Reese and Chindy Carter delivered brutal cheap shots, and the league's officials routinely turned a blind eye to the targeted hostility. Clark was being battered, bruised, and mentally drained every single night, floating on an island by herself. The franchise desperately needed someone with enough ice in their veins to draw a line in the sand and protect their generational investment. Enter Sophie Cunningham. The moment Cunningham arrived in Indiana, the entire psychological climate of the team shifted overnight. Sophie wasn't just another veteran filling out the roster. She became Clark's ultimate human shield, an uncompromising, ruthless enforcer who made it crystal clear to the entire league that touching Caitlin would come with a heavy, painful price. Whenever an opponent attempted to intimidate or physically bully Clark, Sophie was the first to step into the fire. She absorbed vicious technical fouls, went head-to-head with hostile crowds, and willingly accepted the label of the WNBA's biggest villain, all to ensure Clark could breathe, shoot, and dominate in peace. Inside the Indiana locker room, an unbreakable sisterhood was forged through blood, sweat, and shared combat. Clark finally felt safe, knowing that no matter how ugly things got on the floor, Cunningham had her back unconditionally. However, as Cunningham's fiery loyalty grew, so did the toxic jealousy and frustration simmering within Indiana's coaching staff and executive offices. Head coach Stephanie White, alongside high-ranking executives like Lynn Dunn, began viewing Sophie's aggressive, protective nature not as an asset, but as an uncontrollable liability. Tensions quietly boiled over behind closed doors. Rumors began circulating that veteran players were growing bitter over Clark and Cunningham's dominant alliance, feeling completely sidelined in their own locker room. Coaches aggressively demanded total authority, military-style discipline, and complete control over how the players behaved, while Sophie remained stubbornly focused on one thing only: defending her superstar at all costs. The front office hated that Sophie was becoming the emotional heartbeat of the franchise, eclipsing the tactical systems Stephanie White was desperate to enforce. Behind the bright arena lights, a cold, calculated power struggle was secretly brewing between a rigid coaching staff hungry for control and an enforcer who refused to let her point guard get pushed around. Stephanie White wanted an obedient team of soldiers, but Sophie Cunningham was running a ruthless security team for Caitlin Clark, setting the stage for an explosive backstab that would soon rock the entire basketball world. The simmering friction inside the Indiana Fever facility finally turned into a horrifying nightmare on the frigid morning of the alleged suspension. Sources describe the atmosphere inside the practice facility as painfully cold, with an ominous, suffocating tension hanging heavy in the air before most players had even pulled into the parking lot. In a calculated, covert maneuver, Coach Stephanie White reportedly summoned Sophie Cunningham into the front office for an unexpected, closed-door meeting. There were no teammates present to defend her, no media cameras to document the ambush, and zero advanced warning. With cold precision, White informed Cunningham that her relentless aggression, emotional outbursts, and rogue court defense were damaging the franchise's public image and destroying team structure. The front office handed down an immediate, private, and indefinite suspension. But the real backstab wasn't just the punishment. It was the sinister cover-up. To prevent massive public outrage and shield themselves from fan backlash, management reportedly planned to leak a fake injury report to the press, claiming Sophie was sidelined due to a right elbow injury. Think about the soul-crushing agony of that moment. Imagine giving your blood, career, and reputation to protect a franchise, only to be quietly purged by the very executives you bled for. Witnesses claim Sophie left the office with tears welling in her eyes, silently clearing out her locker before her teammates arrived, accepting the fall in heartbreaking silence so she wouldn't fracture the locker room. She walked away, believing the people she fought so hard to protect might never learn the dark truth behind her sudden disappearance. But management's toxic, secret scheme completely collapsed the exact second Caitlin Clark walked through the arena doors. Scanning the room, Clark instantly noticed Sophie's empty locker. When a trembling locker room staff member quietly whispered the truth about the private suspension, the MVP candidate didn't just express disappointment. She exploded into a terrifying, uncontrollable rage. This was a volcanic mixture of heartbreak, anger, and absolute betrayal. Clark immediately saw through the executive spin. The teammate who had repeatedly taken physical beatings for her was being sacrificed just to satisfy a rigid coaching staff's ego. Without even lacing up her sneakers or acknowledging the assistant coaches, Clark marched down the hallway towards Stephanie White's office with a level of blind fury nobody in the organization had ever seen. Slamming the office door open, Clark unleashed a blistering, emotional tirade, screaming that Sophie had absorbed every hit meant for her and reminding White that without Cunningham, the team's foundation was nothing. But then came the first truly shocking twist that froze the entire facility in place. Clark didn't just demand answers. She leaned over the coach's desk, locked eyes with White, and threatened to instantly break her contract, abandon the season, and walk out of the WNBA forever alongside Sophie. The moment Caitlin Clark's nuclear ultimatum echoed off the walls of Stephanie White's office, the Indiana Fever facility descended into pure, unadulterated anarchy. The threat wasn't just empty locker room bravado. It was an apocalyptic earthquake capable of destroying the economic foundation of women's basketball. Within minutes, panicked front office executives were frantically dialing emergency lines, bypassing local management and sending the crisis straight to WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert's desk. Executives were trapped in an unprecedented nightmare. If Clark walked away in protest, packed arenas would empty overnight, multi-million-dollar broadcast deals would crumble, and nearly half the league's global audience would vanish into thin air. The financial future of the WNBA was hanging by a single, terrifying thread. As corporate suits scrambled to control the swelling damage behind closed doors, the narrative on the outside took an even darker, more twisted turn. Fans began noticing suspicious, calculated media hits popping up across sports networks, openly smearing Clark's leadership and questioning Cunningham's professionalism. Veteran sports commentators like Dan Dakich doubled down on insider reports, accusing the Fever front office of intentionally feeding inflammatory leaks to the press to undermine their own superstar. Rumors spread like wildfire that rival figures across the league, including Minnesota Lynx head coach Cheryl Reeve, were watching the internal collapse with predatory satisfaction, capitalizing on the chaos to further fracture Indiana's fragile locker room. Inside the facility, the air was thick with paranoia. Players were whispering in corners, unsure of who was loyal to Clark and who was secretly leaking corporate propaganda to save their own contracts. Stephanie White attempted to call an emergency team meeting to restore order, but the damage was irreversible. Clark sat in cold, stony silence, completely refusing to engage, put on her jersey, or step onto the court for practice. She had officially disconnected from the franchise, transforming into a silent assassin holding the entire league hostage until her protector was reinstated. Then, just as management believed they were preparing to issue a forced public statement to smooth over the media storm, the second major, shocking twist struck like a bolt of lightning. A high-ranking insider leaked a bombshell revelation from deep within the executive board. Sophie Cunningham's suspension was never actually about her aggressive foul trouble or her fiery court defense. In reality, a faction of jealous front office members and envious rival players had actively conspired to force Cunningham out as part of a ruthless, systematic campaign to break Clark's power dynamic within the team. Management realized that as long as Sophie was standing guard, Caitlin was untethered, fearless, and impossible to control. By quietly cutting down Cunningham, the front office believed they could finally break Clark's spirit, force her back under corporate authority, and regain total control over the franchise's multi-billion-dollar narrative. It was a cold-blooded political execution disguised as team discipline, and Clark had just caught them red-handed. The instant news of the internal civil war breached the facility walls. A catastrophic wave of public fallout flattened the sports world. Social media detonated into absolute pandemonium. Millions of furious fans flooded every Indiana Fever platform, launching viral boycott hashtags and bombarding post-comment sections with ruthless clown emojis and scathing accusations. The fake right elbow injury narrative collapsed under the weight of immense fan scrutiny as supporters dissected practice footage frame by frame, pointing out that Sophie Cunningham was fully participating in drills just hours before her sudden, suspicious disappearance. Internet sleuths and sports commentators openly declared the organization a corrupt mafia, calling out the front office for attempting to silence a loyal player while feeding smear pieces to figures like Dan Dakich to tarnish Caitlin Clark's character. Inside the locker room, the emotional fallout was completely paralyzing. The toxic atmosphere turned ice cold as teammates were forced to choose sides in a deeply divided war zone. Key players like Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell were caught in a brutal crossfire, trapped between corporate loyalty to coach Stephanie White and the overwhelming gravity of standing beside their generational point guard. Trust had been utterly decimated. Teammates stopped speaking during walkthroughs. Eye contact was completely avoided, and the once vibrant championship culture mutated into a paranoid nightmare. The realization that management would cold-bloodedly sacrifice a teammate's career just to reassert control sent a chilling message through the locker room. No one was safe. Meanwhile, rival teams across the WNBA watched the emotional collapse with sharp, predatory eyes. Players like Angel Reese and Paige Buchers became central figures in heating public discourse, while coaches like Cheryl Reeve capitalized on the media storm, delivering calculated, thoughtful comments on social justice and team optics that subtly twisted the knife deeper into Indiana's bleeding reputation. The league's public relations apparatus went into full red alert containment mode, desperately trying to stop network sponsors and broadcast partners from pulling multi-million-dollar advertising deals as game ratings began to teeter on the edge of a cliff. For Caitlin Clark, the emotional toll was devastatingly heavy. The superstar who had single-handedly carried the weight of an entire sport on her back was now completely isolated, staring at an empty locker that represented the ultimate betrayal. The pressure was suffocating. She wasn't just fighting for wins or statistical records anymore. She was locked in a high-stakes psychological war for her own dignity, her loyalty to Cunningham, and the soul of her career. The public backlash was deafening. The media pressure was relentless, and as the clock ticked down toward game day, the Indiana Fever organization was officially burning from the inside out, completely helpless to stop the fire they had started. As the deadline for the upcoming game drew dangerously close, the high-stakes poker game between Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever Executive Board reached an absolute boiling point. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert reportedly held an emergency, confidential video conference with Stephanie White and key Fever decision-makers, delivering a ruthless mandate: fix this disaster immediately, reinstate Sophie Cunningham, or face devastating league-wide financial consequences. Terrified of losing their multi-million-dollar golden goose, management finally caved under the mounting pressure. Coach White was forced to swallow her pride, draft a walk-back strategy, and prepare to announce that Sophie had been cleared by medical staff to rejoin the active roster, offering a desperate olive branch to appease their furious superstar. Management truly believed they had weathered the storm, successfully backed down from the edge of the cliff, and saved their season from total annihilation. But just as the front office prepared to hit publish on the public relations release, the final, most catastrophic twist of all shattered the organization to its very core. Sophie Cunningham didn't come running back. In an unprecedented move that stunned executives, Cunningham reportedly flat-out refused to put the Indiana uniform back on under Stephanie White's regime. She wasn't just hurt by the initial betrayal. She recognized that returning under a staged corporate cover-up would only force Clark and the team into an ongoing, toxic nightmare. Standing her ground with absolute dignity, Cunningham issued her own quiet, private message to the front office. She would not play another single minute for a coaching staff that stabbed her in the back and attempted to weaponize her loyalty against Caitlin. The executive board was left completely paralyzed. Reinstating Sophie on paper was meaningless if she refused to step onto the hardwood, and Clark's ultimatum had been crystal clear from the start. If Sophie isn't on that court, Caitlin doesn't play either. Now, the entire WNBA finds itself teetering on the edge of an unprecedented, historic precipice. The arena doors are opening, thousands of fans are filling the stands, and international broadcast cameras are live, waiting for the team to walk out of the tunnel. But inside the dark, silent hallway, Caitlin Clark is sitting at her locker in street clothes, her sneakers still unlaced, staring directly into the eyes of Coach Stephanie White. The clock is ticking down to tip-off. Will Clark actually follow through on the ultimate gamble and walk out on the WNBA forever? Or will the front office deliver one last desperate move that changes basketball history forever? Now I need to hear directly from you, because fans across the entire sports world are completely divided over this exploding situation. Is Caitlin Clark entirely justified in putting her historic season on the line to defend the teammate who protected her at all costs? Or did Coach Stephanie White have every right to suspend a player to maintain absolute authority over the locker room? Drop your honest, completely unfiltered thoughts in the comments right now. Hit that like button if you believe teammate loyalty should always come first, and share this video with every single basketball fan who needs to know the dark truth behind what's happening inside Indiana. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next explosive update in this unbelievable WNBA scandal. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the very next video, buddy.